Welcome back to Bad Attitude C10. So guys, today we're going to be putting together something that some of y'all might think is a little bit overkill, but I came across these 2-liter surge tanks on eBay, and I went ahead and bought a couple of them because I thought I could make kind of a one-size-fits-all overflow, like for your training, your coolant, and possibly even upsize the fittings on them to use them for evac system catch cans. So anyway, here's the dimensions of them, and what I thought I would do is, me always being on the safety side of things and very forgetful, and I'm gonna owe up to that right off the bat because it's a fact. But I don't know how many of y'all have ran catch cans in the past, and you know, you end up putting a shop towel or a rag or some kind of foam deal around the breather element because you just tend to forget about them because they're there, and until they overflow, you never even think about going and checking them or draining them. So I had this bright idea of possibly putting some type of a alert or a light or an idiot light, whichever way you may want to say it, kind of like what you would have like on a windshield wiper reservoir or a coolant, you know, overflow tank, which would tell you not really an overflow tank, but I guess you could say the reservoir tank. When it gets low, it'll kind of make a light come on and say, hey, coolant low, or the windshield washer fluid might say, you know, windshield wiper fluid level low. But use it in the opposite, to where when the tank gets about 2/3 of the way full, a warning light would come on and say, hey, dumbass, it's time to drain me. Or, I mean, not only would it be a preventive maintenance kind of idiot light, but it could also be a warning light if you were to start pushing, you know, fluids during a pass, because you'd see this light come on. So, went on ahead and I looked around and I found some all stainless steel level switches, and they work both ways, normally open or normally closed, depending on which way you put it on. And then I found some unique heavy-duty LED lights that cost a little more than just a little run-of-your-mill plastic ones, but they would flash instead of stay steady. Because if you're like me, you already got a lot of lights in your car. You know, if you got a lot of toggle switches or a switch panel that indicate, you know, power's on or this or that's on. And I figured a flashing light might catch my eye a little better. So here's a picture of, you know, some of the lights that I picked out. I got them in several different colors, like red, yellow, green, blue, you name it. So anyway, I figured I'd share this idea with y'all, and I have a couple of these out on some friends' cars, and we've been testing them. And Neverboard S10 is one of the guys, and here's a, you know, picture of his channel and a link to him. Frank does, I guess you say, like sand, dirt, and mud, you know, truck kind of stuff, and drives on rough terrain. And he's been giving me some feedback, and his does sometimes trip, you know, when he's on bumpy terrain or when he launches and it's going through the rutty area of a track. But on pavement, everything so far, everybody's been giving me good feedback. So our tanks actually start life as a surge tank for a fuel system. So they're already welded and assembled, and they have some O-ring, 6AN O-ring, whichever style thread base you want to talk about. There's 3 of them, and I went in and drilled a hole for the sending unit, and I put a bung down in the bottom to be used as a drain, or if you wanted it to be a recovery tank that could recirculate, you could put your hose down there instead of on the top. Now, in addition, I bought some super nice caps to be used for this, and I used the ring that came with the tank, and they press fit, and then I had had them TIG welded to the ring. Now, these aren't supposed to be sealed, you know, with an O-ring or anything, because they're not really going to be used as a full type overflow canister or anything like that, but we will be putting a little silicone on them when we seal them up. In addition, I did tell you I found some stainless steel level sensors, and I've already flipped the float on this one, and it'll be hung vertical, and whenever the fluid pushes it up, it will make the light come on. So it'll probably hold about 2/3 of the way up to the top of fluid before the warning light went off. And as I mentioned, the warning lights are some heavy duty metal ones, and they're really, really nice. So first off, I'm going to show you exactly how the little system will work. And so I got my little test battery here, and we'll hook it up real quick with the hot and the ground. And this is the LED light. That way you can see what it actually does. So instead of a steady light, it's got kind of a flash, and it's pretty, you know, quick. And this has a cover. Let's see if it looks a little brighter with the cover off. They've put them on there to keep them from getting scratched up in transit and whenever they're being stored or on the shelves and all that good stuff. So here we go. And basically it gets energized and it flashes. So what the level sensor will do is we'll actually have a ground wire that will go directly, to ground, and then one side will go to one wire of the level sensor, and then the other side of the level sensor will provide ground to the LED light. So the light will actually be powered up at all times, and it'll be sitting there just waiting for a ground. So whenever your float level actually gets, pushed up to where it sends a signal, it completes the ground circuit and makes the light flash. So pretty straightforward and simple. So let's get ready to get started with the build. So we're going to start off by getting our level sensor ready to be installed, and I'm going to remove this O-ring and go ahead and put like a Teflon, PTFE, whichever style washer you want to call it. I figured that would be better than having an O-ring on there that could, after a few years of service, possibly get hard and start falling apart, and then create, the level switch sensor, whichever way you want to say it, start having a little rattle and bouncing around. So I'm going to install one of these little Teflon washers to it, and then guys, I'm going to just basically put the wires inside the tank first and get them started in the hole, and basically then use that to thread the needle, as you might say, to get my switch / sensor in place. Once I get the sensor / switch installed, I'll go ahead and put the jam nut on and tighten it up by hand. Now I can't fit a 5/8 wrench in the tank, so what I generally will do is I'll snug it up as tight as I can get it by hand, and then use a pair of channel locks to hold it from the top, and I'll tighten the jam nut up with the wrench and then stake it with a center punch. I didn't want to bore y'all with this next step, so I went on ahead and super fast time-lapsed it. So I installed some woven wire sleeving and shrink wrap using a heat gun. And here's the finished product. So I chose to use the 2-pin weather pack style connectors because they are watertight, and they'll hold up to weather and everything else, and they come with little sealing rings and connecting ends that you got to put on your cell. So let's get started. Well, shit, here we go again. Well, I ended up getting the weather pack connector on, as you can see here, and it's all, shrink wrapped up, sealed up, ready to go, and this is what it looks like on the tank. So the electrical portion of this tank is done, and that's what we got. So up next, I will now show you how to install the other half of this weather pack connector and how the wires and the pins and everything go in place. Now to open it, I just pull both sides out and then just push and flip it open as shown here. And I don't even have good fingernails or anything like that, but it's pretty easy peasy, nothing hard to work with. Now as far as the wiring goes, since I'm going to have 2 of these tanks located in the back, I have 2 wires that came in the wiring kit from the switch panel a long time ago from K&R Products, and I'm going to use one side of this to send the ground down. So I'm going to start off by putting the grommet over the wire, and I usually don't use any type of lubricant or anything. I just thread it on and spin it by fingers and pull at the same time, and it goes through pretty easy. Up next, I'm going to get my wire strippers out, and this is 18 gauge wire, and I'm just going to strip back the amount that I need and then twist the wire to make sure it stays together. Once that's done, we'll push the sealing grommet up to the end of the jacket of the wire, and then we'll get our connector out. Now on the connector, you can see these blades that hold the seal on are a little long, and guys, I ain't gonna lie, I have broken these and broken them. So what I generally do is I cut about 1/3 of them off to make them to where they're smaller, and even though sometimes they do not completely surround the seal, they do hold them and lock them in place, and I quit breaking the connectors, because you continue to break these connectors and have to take them off and take them off and take them off. It's a pain in the ass. So you don't have to do this. I do this. It's my preference, and as you can see here, it's just that much is all that's cut off, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So we'll then take our connector and we'll slide it up over the wire, and we'll get the strip back wire portion where the crimp is for it, and make sure the 2 blades sticking off for the seal are in place. Now this wire is 18 gauge, so we're going to use the crimper marked 18, and if you'll notice, one side is round, the other has a little tit in it. We want the tit side to go on the open end of the crimp, that way it can fold over the blades, and then just line it up and squeeze. So after crimping it, I'll usually fill it, make sure everything's good, and do a little pull test. And as you can see here, it's got a tight crimp and it's good. So up next, I make sure the blades are kind of smushed together and I can get them in the crimper. And I use the 18 gauge that has a little bit wider. And again, make sure the little tip side is toward the open end of the crimp. And again, we move forward just by doing a little squeeze. So there you go. As you can see, crimp looks good, nice, clean, rounded sides, nothing smashed, mushed, or broke. So we're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and time lapse through doing the second side. Now when it comes to using these weather pack connectors, they are marked A and B, and there is one side that has a locking tang and they just slide together as so. So whenever you're putting your wires in, you're going to put them in and make sure the A and B is lined up, and if you had a hot to ground, they need to be on the proper sides. In our case, it's a ground going in and a ground coming out, so it really doesn't matter. So I'm going to start by pushing the black ground wire in, and this wire is actually a 16 gauge instead of an 18 gauge because it's only black wire I had left. So whenever I put this together, you're going to notice the black wire is a little bigger. So that's all it is. It's what I had available. So again, you're just going to put the pin in and you're going to push it. As you push it in, you'll get a little resistance from the rubber grommet. Just push it in, and as you go, you'll feel it kind of click into place, and the little tangs will spread out and it won't pull out. So I do a pull test first, and I look, and there's the A and B marked on this one, and then I just close down the lock, and voila, it's done. So before we start putting everything else on the tank, we're going to go ahead and put the ground wire back on the battery and hook one side of the ground up to one side of the level switch / sensor, whichever one you want to call it. And after that, we're going to click the other side to the ground that's going over to the wire that's the ground side of the LED. Then we're going to put a hot wire on the LED, and from there it's going to go to the battery. Now once we get all this hooked up, I'm going to position it in a way that we'll be able to see it as I actuate the level or the float switch, whichever way you want to say it, going up and down. It should make the light flash. And as you can see, the float's up, the light's on, it's down, it's off, up, it comes back on. Third time's the charm, and we will say it's product tested and ready to button up. Up next, we're going to go ahead and install our filler neck. So I'm going to remove the lid from it, and then we're going to install it. But before we bolt it down, I am going to go ahead and run a very small bead of silicone along the inner edge. Now, we're not going to use a bunch of this. It's not really that, technical or anything. Just, it doesn't have to be pretty. Just something to seal it, and then we'll go from there. Now that the silicone's applied, I went on ahead and put the filler neck on and positioned it to where I could install the hardware. So as I mentioned earlier, whenever we tightened up the hardware, it did push down and it pushed silicone out of the outer edge. So I'm going to go ahead and wipe that off and install the cap, and then we'll move on to the next step. When I purchased these tanks, they already have 3 O-ring boss bungs welded into place for 6AN. So I'm going to go ahead and put a 6AN in the first position to receive the line from the transmission, because this tank will be used for my transmission. Now, I do not have any AN wrenches in here other than the AM adjustable jaw wrench, so I'm going to use it, which is fine because these being O-ring base fittings, we don't want to over tighten them. So once that's in place, I'm going to go ahead and put a cap on it for now to keep it, clean of any contaminants. Now, whether I use it for a transmission or a coolant system, I do put a vent plug in it. That way it can vent to atmosphere and the tank does not build up any pressure and cause it to expand and fail. So we're going to put that in. Again, it is O-ring base, so we're just going to snug it up pretty good. In the final slot, we're just going to go ahead and put a plug. With the top side of the tank now done, we're going to move down to the 1/4-inch MPT bung that I had welded in. So I'm going to go ahead and put a ball valve for a drain on my application, since this is not a recirculating tank. It's just a puke can or overflow can, sorry. And now I normally would put pipe dope on this because it is pipe thread, but since I do not have the pipe dope in the house, all I have is Teflon tape. It just so happened that it came with some. So it is my tank, so I'm not worried about it. I prefer using the pipe dope, but I'm going to go ahead and take this Teflon tape and tear a piece off and wrap this up and install it. With the ball valve now pretty snug, I'm going to go ahead and get it to where I can get it level to where whenever you turn the handle, it's clear of everything and it's in a flat position. Now, sometimes these little nylock nuts that hold these handles on are not into the locking portion of the nut, so you might want to double check it and be sure. So in my case, this one was not all the way tight into the nylock portion, so I'm going to tighten it up real quick. So there you go, guys. I hope it wasn't too long, but I'm trying to cover as much of it as I can. And I hope you liked it. And until next time, I'll check you later.